Good morning. I see lots of participants are coming in. It is 11:31, but we're just going to go ahead and let that room fill up. We're expecting quite a large number today. Good morning to those of you just joining. We're just waiting for everyone to be able to enter the lobby and we'll get started. Okay. Give it one more minute. It looks like it slowed down a little bit, so most people have probably entered. Okay. Well, in the essence of time, thank you everyone for participating today. I just wanted to say welcome to the GenAI for Local Leaders webinar hosted by the California Department of Technology exclusively for the MESAC and SISDA members. My name is Amy Rodriguez, and I'm with our Communications and Stakeholder Relations team. We're so glad you could join us today. We have a fantastic lineup of best practices and lessons learned to share with all of you. But before we dive in, I just want to address a few quick housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with all attendees within the next week. The chat feature is disabled throughout the session, but if you have questions at any point during the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. Any questions that we're not able to answer today will be captured, addressed, and emailed out to you after the event. And now, without further ado, I would like to welcome State Chief Information Officer and Director of CDT, Leanna Bailey Crimmins.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss a topic that is top of mind for Californians and the nation, generative AI. Cybersecurity and AI were listed as the top two priorities of all state CIOs in 2025. And as we think about state CIOs and how this kind of trickles down into both state, county, city, municipality, what our goal is we've been on a journey over the last year, and we want to share. We want to share our successes, our lessons learned, and really just continue how we partner together. I've been at a lot of SISDA and MESAC events, and we talk about partnership, and it's a theme that we lock arm in arm, but we walk the walk. So this isn't just something where we say we're doing it. We really want this to be as engaging as much as possible. So, but before we get started, I need to thank MESAC and SISDA for organizing this session. Without them, we wouldn't be able to continue to have that two-way conversation, their continued partnership, their leadership, making sure that we are, again, being as collaborative as possible and that communication is flowing two ways. But I also want to acknowledge the incredible work being done across California. City, county, public utilities, what we're doing to modernize services and improve efficiency. And I will even say, I'm working really closely right now with county and city just on the LA fire responses and the state and federal. And just when we all need each other, we lean in. And it's not like, people block my phone call or anything. We are always helping each other. And so today, again, our approach is government for all. We don't want a city, county, municipality, state, any of us. Whenever we need something, if there's a crisis or if there's just the thoughts around what we're doing on an emerging technology, that we're all leaning in. This is a pivotal point. Artificial intelligence and specifically generative AI is going to change how we live, our day-to-day lives, how we interact with each other at work, and really ultimately how we serve the public. Governor Gavin Newsom, September 6, 2023, his forward-looking executive order, not only wanting us to look at how we can benefit as a society from artificial intelligence, but also making us think about the guardrails and safeguards and things that we're always, needing to put the forefront. And most of you've heard when we think of strategic imperatives, it's about people first, right? Our people are the public, the people that we serve, making sure that what we're delivering is inclusive digital services for everyone. Also, people first means we're helping each other out. Our staff are have the tools, the mentorship, the training that they need, and so you're going to hear a lot about some of the things we're doing on the training level. Um, Security. We can't be putting out emerging technology without thinking about how we put the right controls in place. How do we hold the vendor community accountable with these contracts? How do we leverage that from each other? I know when we were thinking about way back when Microsoft's contract, we leveraged Riverside's contract. We do this to improve efficiency, improve the public engagement, and of course, strengthening our relationships in the delivery of what's needed for Californians. So let's continue that conversation. We are here. You have an hour of listening to us on what again, our journey, our lessons learned. But I want to encourage you to ask questions on that Q&A button. Please ask, ask, ask. Share your insights with us because it's not just about us, it's about you. Learning how we help each other, our teams, and ultimately the public. With that, I would like to go ahead and now introduce someone that probably doesn't need an introduction, but an amazing person, the Chief Information Officer of the County of Orange and the CISDA President, Casey Rostenberg. I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Leanna. First of all, I'd like to thank you and your team for joining today's webinar. I'd also like to welcome our CISDA members that are joining today, as well as MESAC members. I think all of you know that AI, and specifically generative AI, is probably one of the most significant technology advancements in years. Understanding and informing our government staff and the communities we serve at some level on the appropriate use of AI is critical to the development of the product and to ensuring that the data that we're responsible for and the associated services that we provide the community aren't impacted. So again, thank you for all of you joining. With that, I'd like to introduce Chris Skelly. For those of you that don't know Chris is the Information Technology Manager for South Tahoe Public Utilities District and the Vice President of MESAC. Chris?
Thank you, Casey. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Skelly. It's my pleasure to be here and to have an opportunity to welcome you to today's webinar for AI for local government leaders, presented by the California Department of Technology. As the State Board Vice President of the Municipal Information Systems Association of California, or MESAC for short, I'm thrilled to see so many of you here, all committed to shaping the future of technology in local government. Artificial intelligence is no longer a concept of the future. It's here and transforming the way we deliver public services, enhance operational efficiencies, and engage with our communities. As public sector leaders, it is our responsibility to harness AI's potential while ensuring transparency, equity, and security in its implementation. On behalf of MESAC, I want to extend my gratitude to the California Department of Technology, Leanna, and for organizing this important discussion, and to all of you for your dedication to public service and technological advancements. With that, I'd like to introduce California's State Chief Technology Officer, Jonathan Peratt.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris and Casey. Thank you to all of the CISDA and MESAC partners who took time out of your day to join with us. These partnerships have been so invaluable to us, and I hope we have some insights that we can share, and we'll have a productive discussion both now and in the future. And thanks to Director Bailey Crimmins for a very inspiring kickoff to this discussion. Pat, if you can move to the next slide. So I'm hoping that we can take a couple of minutes just to talk about what our approach has been to GenAI at the state, particularly when it comes to things like governance and policy. And as our director mentioned, kind of the beginning of this work really started, at least with regards to generative AI, with an executive order that came out technically a couple years ago from Governor Newsom. And it's also important to note, as many of you know, that AI is not new to the state. While GenAI brings with it a lot of new capabilities and new risks that we have to both be aware of and hopefully things that we can harness and benefit from, we do know that AI is something that we have a lot of experience with. We know how to use it successfully, and it's a technology that we've been leveraging for a long time in some really cool ways. But because generative AI specifically is new, the governor did release an executive order that laid out kind of the vision for how the state is going to tackle and come up with a strategy around generative AI. And what I'm really proud of is that the approach that we took was very intentional and deliberative. We're seeing right now with the federal government that there's a very hands-off approach to AI. We've also seen with other states and other governments that there's been a much more constrained approach. And rather than just make a decision, the governor really set us on a path to figure out how can we best utilize AI to benefit the state and ensure that we're doing that in a way that's responsible. So before we did anything else, we started by putting together a report of the benefits and risks that we perceived for GenAI use at the state. What are the things that we wanted to get out of generative AI, and what are the things that maybe we want to prevent or mitigate if we can't? And what was great about that whole process was, in addition to kind of setting the values and the outcomes that we were going to build our governance against, we also had a chance to really reach out to our community. So we were able to meet with other governmental organizations, we were able to meet with academia, many of the UC system schools, we were able to meet with vendor partners in the tech industry, with community-based organizations and advocates, and make sure that all of those different perspectives were in there so that when we're thinking about policy and governance, we're basing it off of the feedback that we got. And hopefully many of you have been doing the same. Coming out of that benefits and risk report, we ended up doing an inventory to look at how is artificial intelligence being used at the state, and what are some areas that different state departments and entities want to use GenAI. And then from there, we issued guidelines. So instead of starting with policies specifically, we tried to figure out, based on how AI is in use, based on the technology that we're aware of, what are some of those high-level rules? What are some of those high-level directions that we want to provide to folks at the state? So coming out of that, we did something that we'll talk about later, which we're really excited about, which is we actually launched a variety of different proofs of concept for different ways that we can use GenAI at the state. And we've started, and we're getting close to wrapping up this initial round that was more focused in different high-value business propositions. So things like analyzing large data sets or using language translation tools to improve language access to our services. And now we're actually doing another round of proofs of concept that are a little more focused on policy outcomes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation today. So with all of that information, these high-level values that we care about, things that we want to contribute to, things that we want to mitigate or prevent, with an understanding of how AI is being used at the state, and with some information and knowledge from learning, we're getting ready to actually release our AI policy as the Department of Technology at the state. And there's kind of two annoyingly contradictory messages that I want to put out there as we think about what that policy is. So the first is we realize that we really need to innovate the way that we govern. A lot of IT governance tends to be very proscriptive. So it tends to be, if you have this type of encryption, or if you meet these very specific security requirements, then you're good to go and use it. But what we learned is that a lot of the risks related to GenAI are much more holistic. So we realized that we have to focus a lot more on, rather than the output of our systems, the outcomes related to those systems. And that's why we've taken a real collaborative and consultative approach when it comes to GenAI review, as opposed to having this strong, like, Iron Gate approval process for every single potential use case for GenAI. So we'll talk a little bit about this more today as well, but we have a risk assessment form that each state Chief Information Officer and Chief Information Security Officer is supposed to fill out when their department has a use case related to GenAI. And we review that with them and engage in a consultation to make sure, as they're thinking through that technology, that they're making sure that they're optimizing those benefits we laid out in that benefits and risk report, and that we're mitigating or preventing those risks that we don't need. The other part of that, which is worth bringing up, is, again, kind of the opposite of that, which is we don't have to start completely from scratch. We have a really strong team when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to security, when it comes to digital services. And there's a lot of good work that we've done on conventional AI and other emerging technologies that we can apply. So even though we have this consultative approach, we want to be collaborative, we want to really guide departments to go on the journey, as our director mentioned, there are also some things that we know are very important, and we do need to make sure that we're not flexible when it comes to security. So that's why we do have some requirements, like, if you are going to build an AI solution, you need to test it in a test environment and not just start in production, for example. We're asking departments to come up with an acceptable use guide, an acceptable use policy, so that they can help their own workers understand what makes sense for them and what's something that maybe they can bring up at our level when it comes to security. So In addition to having this collaborative, open approach, we also have some strict ground rules that we need to put in place to make sure that we're looking out for the state as a whole. One last thing I'll share before we move on to our next topic is at the end of the presentation, we have some information on a website called genai.ca.gov. And on that site, you can find everything that I just spoke about in my short time here. So all of the work that we've done on the executive order, all of our procurements, all of our policy documents, including news and developments that are coming out from the state, are all available online. We would love for you to be able to utilize those as a resource where you need to. So if you're looking for a template for something like a policy document, for a risk assessment form, how did the state do procurement, which I'm excited to talk about because we did that in a little bit of a unique way, leveraging some challenge-based procurement concepts. All of that is available for you, and I'm definitely around. I hope others who will share in some of these topics in more detail will be around as well, to answer any questions or be able to even work with you to see how we might be able to apply that given your values and some of your processes. So I'm excited for you all to get some more information on some of the high-level concepts I mentioned today. And I'm going to hand everything over to Jared Johnson, who is our Chief Deputy Director and the Deputy State CIO.
Thank you, Jonathan, and hello, everybody. It's good to see you today. I'm just going to share a little bit of information about use cases and what the state has been doing over the little over a year now on working with industry partners and departments within the state to evaluate the uses of generative AI. Next slide, please. So we have some areas here that I want to share with you in our approach. And as Jonathan mentioned, we've started with really understanding some early use cases with our benefits and risk report. And in that, we looked at uses that support the state workforce. And that's really been our emphasis from day one, is how can we support the state workforce and alleviate those concerns and fears of being replaced by technology. So that has been something that we have emphasized, perhaps overemphasized, but we think it's one of the most critical things, a takeaway from this work that we have done and really led to the success of the proofs of concept that we have studied at the state. Our early use cases were designed to be scaled across multiple high-value enterprise business propositions. We're focusing in on things such as language access, the ability to translate content quickly, chat assistance, and supporting the workforce with analysis workloads that we would summarize large data sets and be able to provide a quick analysis and summary of that information. You'll hear more about our procurement method, but we are leveraging the governor's innovative request for innovative ideas, or RFI squared, to engage with innovative partners. And we set out these state challenges, and then those partners respond back and provide us concept papers that tell us how they would solve that problem. And then that's how we evaluate and decide to move forward with certain innovators in a proof of concept. We have deployed our I just want to pause and say that we are also focusing on publicly available data for our proofs of concept. We are not including any of those sensitive things like PHI, PII, or FTI, federal tax information, things like that. So our early studies have been around that publicly available data. We are operating these proofs of concept in our state sandboxes, leveraging the state's cloud infrastructure contracts. And we're using the state workforce to design, develop, and manage these environments. We're putting all of the security and operational controls and safeguards in place to ensure that we understand how these solutions are interacting with the state's data, protecting the state's data within the sandbox, and really using that to evaluate not only the user experience from the workforce, but making sure that the business value and the outcomes that we had hoped to achieve are being realized. We've already started another round of POCs, if you haven't heard, a second round. So these are focused on key policy areas. And we're really excited. We learned a lot the first round of proofs of concept. And the second round, we hope, will be really streamlined, and it'll just reinforce some of the things we've learned. I'll share lastly here, my biggest takeaway, I think, like I mentioned, is the workforce engagement. That's really critical to this. Not only you'll hear about with our trainings and things of that nature, but it's important for them to understand the technology, but also how it supports them. And so that user experience and having the ability to work alongside these proofs of concepts has proven to be really, really valuable for the workforce, because it demystifies some of the things that you might hear in the headlines about what AI is doing or capable of doing. And lastly, my takeaway is to remain flexible. So early on, we put in place like procurement guidelines and certain policies and processes to work around this. And because the technology is evolving so rapidly, we found that we have to be flexible with those things, and also even our risk considerations. We start out maybe in a more conservative type of approach when it comes to risk, and then as we learn from the technology, it allows us an opportunity to kind of reevaluate what we thought and make sure we're still on the right track. So as we've progressed through the executive order and all the different deliverables, we've been able to leverage lessons learned from each of those to inform the next steps. And with that last deliverable that's coming up here in early this year with our project approvals and our contracts, terms, and conditions, it really culminates a lot of the things we've done with the proofs of concepts and the other research we've done in this area to make sure, that we are incorporating all of that and continuing to improve our processes. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Crystal Holcomb. She is our Deputy Director in the Office of Professional Development, and she will be sharing some information about our training.
Thank you, Jared. As we embrace GenAI, we need to ensure we do it responsibly and securely, as you heard today, and that starts with training. I'm happy to share that the state has a variety of GenAI training and resources available, and most of it is free. Next slide, please. We have everything from virtual, e-subscription learning, and in-person training, and some of them include certification. We tailor to 3 audiences. So CalHR is responsible for providing training to the general workforce as well as business leaders, and CDT offers technical training. We recommend that the general workforce take the 2.5-hour self-paced training through CalHR called Responsible AI Basics. SUPS managers and executives are encouraged to take the general training followed by Responsible AI, Scaling AI in Your Organization, which is another 3 hours. And then CalHR ODI as a partner also offers a Foundations of GenAI Series Certificate, which includes 5 separate courses that cover approximately 42 hours of competency-based training. Next slide, please. As for CDT, the 4 technical domains that we offer are security, data, engineering, and project management. Next slide. Here's links and QR codes for both CalHR and CDT's training websites. I encourage you to check in regularly as we continue to refine and expand our training portfolio. And if you see something as you guys start to embrace GenAI that you need training in that we don't currently offer, reach out to me and my team and let me know, and we can be happy to see if we have, a vendor partner or a training that maybe we should be offering, as this will be a constant evolution. Thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to the Deputy Director for Statewide Technology and Procurement, Tiffany Angulo.
Hi, thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Tiffany Angulo here. We are the oversight for state agencies that conduct large, complex IT, telecommunications, and public safety statewide procurements. So I am honored to be here today and speak to you about GenAI. So as we know, GenAI has swiftly made an exciting but unknown impact in government technology. Therefore, it's important that we establish at a state level the necessary procurement support for our buyers. We saw our role in this journey to really support and help our customers create a conducive environment for innovation, leveraging buying economies of scale, but also fostering a safe and secure procurement approaches for our buyers. Next slide. Oh, I apologize. Can you go back to the previous slide? Sorry. So we also wanted to pause here and talk about how we were able to do that and balance both procurement policies, but leveraging the flexibility we have to maintain with generative AI. So I'd like to bring to you a few resources that we have been working on that enables our state departments to do that. So next slide. The state has recently published lots of guidance and intends to publish even more in the near future about documentation and e-tools that will help their buyers in their business programs as they're procuring generative AI. One of which includes topics that identify statement work elements to be addressed. We've updated our market research guidelines to include questions related to GenAI when you're conducting discovery. We also address GenAI in contract language, such as vendors disclosures that we've created to hold vendors accountable and resellers to identify and bring to attention any GenAI that's introduced either during or after contract award. In this, we've also endeavored to take on those terms and conditions related to GenAI. We created these in a scalable fashion so that you have choices. You have a general broad set embedded into our general terms and conditions. And then based on the type of transaction, whatever the buy is, either moderate or high risk, there's special terms and conditions to address those as well. So this ensures the vendors comply with state and federal regulations. I would also like to mention that we have educational training, like Crystal mentioned, published as well for buyers. Another area of interest would be our forthcoming GenAI Depot, or aka Marketplace. This will be a centralized data repository that counties can leverage to see how the state is categorizing and streamlining products and services. The foundation will use standard use cases that have been tested and deployed safely. It will also house journey maps to help navigate procurement options and buying instructions. Next slide. So these are some of the areas that I talked about. On the previous screen, there was the RFI squared. And as Jonathan and Jared both talked about that, we're going to briefly talk about some of the steps involved in that. This process has really helped the state deploy an iterative approach to procure those larger scale solutions that include generative AI. So the first phase would be where evaluators study the vendor's concept via the standard approach by submitting their proposal, but also allowed for videos and held confidential conversations to empower departments to gain real insight and information from our vendors. In phase 2, the vendors were then down selected to integrate their GenAI technology in small increments in our state sandbox and host an MVP proof of concept. The focus of the RFI squared is to ultimately allow GenAI vendors to implement responsibly, focusing on privacy, fairness, and transparency. And then also the benefits realized from this process were obviously improved solution selections and better risk management. And I would also answer the question to the vendors, enhanced collaboration with vendors is what we heard the most of. So in closing, irrespective of your size or resource, I hope your procurement shop back home can use these practical examples to learn from our challenges, and this information can aid in establishing your GenAI procurement long-term goals. With that, I will pass this to Payam in security.
All right, thanks, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. My name is Payam Hoja. I'm the Chief of Cyber Risk and Governance for the State of California. Today, I'll be going into security around GenAI. Next slide. So, as we all know, technology is evolving rapidly, and GenAI is the forefront of that change. So, from automating workflows to enhancing public services, GenAI is beginning to play a role in how we operate. And so, our approach is not to necessarily resist or reject, but rather embrace it, adapt strategically, establish guardrails, and then take a proactive stance in shaping its direction. So, however, any type of innovation, it presents its own unique security challenges. Specifically for GenAI, we're talking about concerns around data privacy, misinformation, and potential vulnerabilities that threat actors can exploit. So our perspective, and hopefully yours as well, is we have a responsibility to ensure that GenAI is used safely, ethically, and in compliance with regulations out there. So today I'll be talking about how we approach GenAI from a GenAI security from a state perspective, the lessons learned and potential guidance that you can take back for your organizations. Next slide, please. So we take a holistic approach of GenAI, examining its impact to the state of California and its constituents. It's important to emphasize that the security challenges associated with GenAI and its risks are highly dependent on the organization's risk tolerance and the specific use cases of that system. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. What may be considered high risk for one entity might not be for another, as use cases vary widely. Additionally, an organization's overall risk tolerance plays a critical role in determining appropriate safeguards and security measures for those use cases. Now, CDT reinforces GenAI and security controls through various factors, specifically surrounding 6 key concepts where I'll briefly touch upon. The first being data privacy and security compliance. So not only do we require GenAI systems to comply with state and federal policies and laws, but we mandate the completion of a PIPTA, privacy impact analysis, and privacy threshold assessment. These assessments help organizations identify the data they want to use, understand relevant regulatory requirements, and implement appropriate security controls to ensure compliance while preventing the misuse of sensitive information. The next one, transparency and accountability. So our constituents are our customers, and we want to collaborate with them while encouraging their engagement with us. That's why we prioritize transparency and accountability to build that trust. From an accountability standpoint, we implement the human in the loop approach for high-risk use cases and critical decision-making. For example, benefit programs, anything related to healthcare, housing services. This ensures there's human oversight. Human oversight is present to prevent biased or unjust decision making. Additionally, when leveraging GenAI generated content, we require disclosures to distinguish GenAI content versus human. Our policies mandate specific disclosure language that inform users whenever GenAI content is being consumed. And this kind of leads into the next topic, which is user right and consent. First, all applicable data protection laws remain in effect. Doesn't matter what technology you're using, unauthorized data collection is strictly prohibited, and there must be an opt-out option, right? And then additionally, any communication systems we implement, like chatbots, we have an opt-out option. This allows users to rather communicate with a human representative, right? Next slide, please. Next, we have vendor compliance. So to mitigate those third-party risks, we enforce state standards for data security, privacy, and risk management. Additionally, we require vendor contracts to include language that ensures transparency and accountability, specifically around incident reporting, audit log, maintenance, and compliance verification. We have to hold our vendors just as accountable, as they are a vulnerability in themselves, and they are a huge unknown at times. Next, we have risk mitigation and monitoring. So we require all GenAI systems to undergo a risk assessment to help identify risk. It's critical to understand those nuances of what you're introducing into your environment. Since each use case impacts organizations differently, we just have to make sure leadership doesn't, leadership assesses those risks carefully and doesn't just generalize. Like I mentioned, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We found that involving subject matter experts really help clarifies uncertainties and that FUD that is around GenAI. And CDT kind of does this through consultations, which we discussed and we'll go into a little more, but with the state entities, And we're more than happy to help provide additional guidance to those looking for help. You don't have to start from scratch. Additionally, we recommend implementing a zero trust model. From the state's perspective, continuous monitoring is essential, and we maintain a heightened vigilance over these systems due to their unprecedented adoption and inherent nuances. And then finally, continuous oversight is required to ensure GenAI compliance, risk management, and vendor accountability throughout the system's lifecycle. This is to ensure alignment with organizational goals, legal mandates, and new risks. There will always be new ledge that comes out, and so we have to make sure that we're on our toes, we're able to adapt and change as needed. Next slide, please. And now furthermore, additional practices we recommend include implementation of secure AI practices. So start with your backbone so you have direction. Develop an AI risk assessment and feel free to reach out to us. Me and my team developed the assessment. We're more than happy to share what we've learned, what we have, and go over it with you. Create an approval process, and most importantly, understand your risk appetite. Know what's acceptable for you and what you're willing to take on. This will be different for every organization. Next, set up monitoring and auditing for AI tools. Find a means of accountability. Understand what's good versus bad to you. Define acceptable use to help identify those parameters. And then finally, human in the loop. Now, from a policy standpoint, we recommend that, when you're writing those Gen AI policies, that you leverage existing frameworks, including NIST 853, ZTA, AI RMF, and ensure sustainable and long-term AI governance. And then finally, learn from best practices from other government agencies. Ask for help. Don't feel like you're in this fight alone. We welcome the opportunity to help where we can. So feel free to reach out, learn from us, and we can help provide guidance wherever is needed. But with that, that kind of wraps up what I have. And I believe the next presenter is Ren. Yep, on innovation. Thank you.
Hello, Payam. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here today. And if you go to the next slide. So not only are we mandated, but it should be embedded in the culture of any technological organization to drive innovation. And with generative AI, we want to do that, but we want to do that in a low-risk environment. And the way that we're doing it is we have what we call our state sandboxes. These sandboxes are isolated and secure cloud environments managed by the state. And this gives us the opportunity to test generative AI, no matter how risky it could be, in a secure environment, and it does not touch anything within the state. So that gives us the opportunity to really push the boundaries of innovation without actually putting the state at risk for its systems and its data. So not only are the sandboxes isolated, but the data that we use from the state is publicly available data. We ensure that when we're testing generative AI, that we're not using sensitive, whether it's PII, healthcare data, or any other data that might be sensitive. And this is for several reasons. One, we want to protect the data of the citizens and of the state. And two, if we want to be able to have a repeatable process with the data, we want to be able to share that data with other people. So now we have a secure environment, and we do it in a low-risk environment. The next piece to our innovation is we want to be able to take that innovation all the way from a question, or to answer a question or a business problem within the state, test it in that proof of a concept in that sandbox environment, but then also ready it for MVP. So we have something called the RFI squared process, which we'll discuss a little bit later on. But all of the information and that testing that we do in the sandbox environment is in support of looking for an MVP, which will actually then be a part of the state enterprise IT ecosystem. So this is the process that we have for our sandbox to make sure that we do safe and secure innovation in the state. We have currently done 10 proof of concepts within our sandboxes in 2024, and we're looking to do at least 3 more in 2025. So with that, thank you very much. I think I'll pass that on now to Shani.
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you. My name is Shani Manavan. I'm the Deputy State Chief Technology Officer, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about our consultation process and what that exactly means. Next slide, please. So in the process of helping departments understand how they can use these technologies, and what Payam and Rin and my colleagues were talking about before, is we want to help walk the departments through an understanding of the risks that they're accepting when they use generative AI technologies. So I've worked in the federal space, I've worked in the local space and cities across the world, including San Francisco and Long Beach, shout out to the LBC, But what I'm seeing in a lot of this is a lot of reusability. And so I'll get a little more specific in here in a second. What we're doing with our assessment, it's a form called the 5305F, and I encourage you to look this up. But the idea of the form is to ask some key questions to help people think through their use case. And I know Jared mentioned use case, and so did Liana and Jonathan before, but use cases, I cannot emphasize enough, really are the key here. And my colleague Ren, who just spoke, has a lot of, we like to call them, I call them at least, Renisms. So I'm going to steal a couple of Renisms. The idea with the use cases, a lot of times what you're trying to check is not should you have a tin hat, but is your tinfoil hat big enough? Because the idea is we don't want to necessarily blacklist or whitelist technologies. We're trying to say, depending on the use case, this technology might work really well, or it might not work for this particular use case. Another great Renism, I know it's a saying, but I love it in this context. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So having this moment to think through as a technologist and as the department of what the proper combination of tool and use cases is a really excellent touch point. And I'll give you another like realistic example. In looking at some of the generative AI tools, using the tool to help, for example, summarize someone's performance data is great. Using that tool to write their performance assessment, you would not want to do that. So again, we want to get into the details of the use case and understand, is this the right type of technology? And what comes out of the end of these assessments is generally, do you have the right mitigations in place for the technology that you are trying to use? So in many ways, we're helping the departments understand their risk tolerance. So we've asked each department to self-assess and have the department's chief information officer actually accept the risk or not. So we are just consulting in that, and we're not creating this blanket, oh yeah, this is great, use this and don't use that. Again, so the consultations we've divided into 3 categories. Low is for very simple things that are almost like glorified spell check in a way, the types of technologies you'd expect. Moderate and high are ones that you would expect have some type of potential because the technology can impersonate a staffer to have a definitive answer that you need a human in the loop, as Payam mentioned, to make sure that that answer is not only accurate for the data, but also accurate for that context. So we look at all of them to see if there's a low that might actually be a moderate or a high. Many times we've even had a case where someone said something was a high, and when we looked at it, we said, actually, this is a low. So that conversation is very powerful for both our understanding as a state to understand what our overall usage and technological tool set is, but also for the departments to understand their exact program and needs and the tools that support that. So we've done 85 cases so far in 2024. We usually turn these around very quickly. I know it seems like it's a lot of work, but we usually turn these around, we say in 10 days. Our average time is about 4 to 5 days. And so the last thing that I'll mention is we are really excited about what we're learning, and we love the opportunity to partner with our colleagues at the local and municipal levels. So please reach out to us. I think there's a wonderful set of opportunities for us to share information. We'd love to learn about the cool things that you're doing in your cities and counties. And there also might be partnership possibilities for us to do tighter partnerships. My organization, part of the organization is infrastructure and platform. There might be opportunities there as well. So we would love to open these conversations and explore these with you further. And with that, I think that is the last slide. And if it is, I'm happy to hand this back over to Amy to enter into the question and answer period. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Shani. Yes, I just wanted to take a moment and express my gratitude to all of the speakers today for sharing their valuable insights, and to all of the attendees for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us. We are wrapping up earlier than expected, so we will have some time to go ahead and take some of the questions that were posted in the Q&A and be able to answer those live. If we don't get a chance to answer your question and you have some that come up after this webinar, I just want to make sure that you had a chance to capture where you can send your questions, which is the CDT GenAI intake requests at state.ca.gov, and that will be included on the slide deck when it comes out afterwards as well. Before we take any questions from the Q&A, can I go ahead and have you advance to the next slide, please? I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to capture the website that Jonathan spoke about earlier, the genai.ca.gov. It's got the latest and greatest information to keep you informed. And then I'll go ahead and grab some of the questions out of the Q&A. So I hope all the speakers are ready to grab some of those questions. There's a lot around